All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Hey, you're here at Wild West Hackin Fest, and I am too. Hi, Internet. I hope you're having a good day, just like the rest of us are. And what we're going to be chatting about in our 50 minutes that we've got together is how to use honeypots in a very interesting way with your existing architecture. But before I get into what honeypots are and why you want to use them and how you want to use them, we got to have a little discussion about what the state of the issue is. Okay, so harsh truth number one in this talk is bypassing defenses is often very easy. So I was kind of surprised at how many pen testers were in the crowd when I said, do you do pen testing? Pen testers, have you ever been totally stopped on a pen test because of defenses? So you all of a sudden either got really shy, or the brutal fact of the matter is, bypassing defenses is really quite doable. And unfortunately, so my company does pen tests, and I have yet to write that report, congratulations, you kept us out. What's even sadder is that in many, I would say at least 20-25% of the time I do an attack, especially against web applications, they'll say, how did you bypass the WAF? Y'all had a WAF? Because, sometimes those things are just misconfigured like crazy. And so harsh truth number two is even if you have defenses that are working well and you've tested and tuned, int leak is for real. I'm going to share with you my favorite way to find out what an organization has for their defenses, which is how I bypass a lot of what they do. I go on job posting ads. And so, hey, they're looking for, this was for an MSSP. And so if I know I'm going against this MSSP, I know what defensive controls they're doing. Likewise, here's one for a level 2 analyst, different job, but this network engineer, they're in the middle of migrating from Checkpoint to Palo Alto. As an attacker, I saw that and I was like, well, it's time to get out the A1 steak sauce and a carving knife because this thing is just ripe for the eating. And so attackers, what they do, and this is the harsh truth number three, is that sales folks want sales. And I know that sounds real simple and a lot of people are like, yeah, we get it. No, seriously, do what I do. I'm a 2-year startup company. I call them up and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying, let's go back to that last job posting, I'm thinking about buying some Palo Alto gear. Can I get some demo gear? And they say, well, sure, how long you want it? It comes to my office, and then I have 90 days, half a year, however long, to hack the fool out of it. And now I can bypass your defaults because, let's be honest, folks, a lot of people are just riding the defaults on their defenses controls. So the harsh truth is I can do a POC for almost nothing, and you can too. I see some people kind of scowling a little bit. If you've not met him, I highly, highly recommend that you check out a guy by the name of Jeff McJunkin. And he gave a talk called Building Your Own Kick-Ass Home Lab. And what he does in this just over an hour is walk you through how to put together a home lab that allows you to do all kinds of attack and defensive work for a reasonable budget. In fact, only a couple $1,000s, you're going to be having the capability to just take different kit from the vendors and figure out how to fire packets through it and bypass that. So the fact of the matter is that POC is going to be a rough ride for that bit of kit. So, picture your favorite horror movie and, whether it's Jigsaw or just banjos playing, use your imagination. That bit of kit is going to have a really, really bad day. So let's have a recap here. 1, it is easy for attackers to figure out what your defenses are. All right, I think we can all agree to that. Number 2, it's easy for the attackers to actually get your defenses for 0. for 0. One of the things that drives me absolutely insane is people are like, well, we could stop everybody but a well-funded state organization. Well, why is funding a matter, right? I do most of my pen testing on the cheap, and yet it still works. So once I get those defenses, I set up that abuse lab, and that kit has no chance. It's just a matter of time before it falls apart. So what I've only explained to you is just one technique that I use as an attacker to figure out what your defenses are. So defense, as we're playing it, is fundamentally broken. Now, I want to be clear. I want to be very clear. I'm not saying y'all are bad folks. I'm not saying you're negligent in your job. But what I am saying is that how we do defense, right? For 20 years, we've been telling folks, patch your systems, get yourself a firewall, run antivirus. Well, now what we do is we say, oh, well, you need a next-gen firewall. You need next-gen antivirus, sometimes called EDR, right? So the attackers know what the playbook is, so there's got to be a different way. Well, hey, my name's Mick, and I'm going to share with you some of the things that I do. Now, I teach for SANS. I'm a member of the INS faculty, but in my spare time, I like to run my company, InfoSec Innovations. And what we do is we're primarily a defensive company. Now, we love doing pen tests and believe that you have to do them to keep your claws and teeth sharp. But what I'm going to be sharing with y'all is some of the techniques that I use with my clients, and I want you to take them, have them for free, and use them because they work. So, what we're going to cover in our time is that honeypots are dead easy. You're going to see that slide over and over again in this deck. And the reason why is I want to push back against the notion that honeypots are somehow hard, expensive, time-consuming. That's wrong. That's dated. I'm going to give you ones that are 0 effort or close to it, because I'll be honest, I'm kind of lazy. Now, I like to use the term efficient when I'm, like going in for a job interview or something, or bringing on a new client. But I don't want to work more than I have to, so that's what we're going to be doing, is going over how to do this. The honeypots that we're going to be showing today, you can use with existing infrastructure. And I'm a very big proponent of using what you have with a little creative twist, okay? The reason why is, while funding is good, that funding isn't always going to be there. And so what I want you to do is be able to do a good job with squeezing the most out of what you got. Then I'm going to talk a bit about how honeypots work from a strategic level. You don't want to just deploy honeypots. Those are where people kind of fail. They're just like, well, I'm going to honeypot all the things. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is put honeypots at interesting choke points. You want to put your honeypots at spots where the attackers are going to come, and you're going to use a little trickeration. You're going to use some strategy to make the attacker want to dive in. Now, periodically, I hope you folks hear groans from the pen testers in this talk, because some of these things are just brutal. So, I started off with giving you some harsh truths. The whole point of this talk is to give you hope. So I want to give you some good truths. From here on out, we're done with the harsh truths. So, good truth number 1. Attackers expect normal. The reason why is they get away with it, right? You folks know what ATP is? Or APT? APT? What's APT stand for? Advanced Persistent Threat. Yeah, that's what the vendors would have you believe. The A in that actually stands for adequate, right? Why would they burn an O-day on you if they can get in with a simple phishing link? So what we're going to do is realize that the attackers are going to do that least level effort. And so when they come into our organization expecting normal, we're going to sweep the leg. We're going to sideswipe them by bringing something else to bear with them. Okay, good truth number 2. Attackers are predictable. Attackers actually have playbooks. And different groups have different predictable behaviors, but they all kind of boil down to something like this. They're going to do reconnaissance. Now, your lesser skilled attackers aren't going to be doing this. The script kiddies or the drive-by attacks, they just spray and pray. But the skilled attackers are going to do recon. They're going to do some sort of probing. Once they find things, they're going to start nudging it and seeing how it behaves. And then they're going to start exploiting it. And then once they exploit, they're going to do post-exploitation behaviors. I am going to give you techniques that you can use at each of these phases to frustrate and trip up the attackers. So, good truth number 3. And be prepared to see this slide a lot. Honeypots are dead easy. So, the idea behind a honeypot is that you have something, whether it's a file, a service, a port, user account, database table, anything that when somebody interacts with it, there's no reason for them to interact with it. Now notice, I'm not talking about any of those fancy, neat emulated environments. And if you've got those, if you got the budget, like good luck, God bless, go do that. What I'm talking about is sprinkling a little bit of extra into your existing so that when somebody interacts with it, you got them. So any interaction is suspect. So let's talk about good truth number 4, and this is probably the coolest bit of this talk. Web architectures are very, very easy to honey. Okay? Whether you're talking your classic N-tier architecture where you've got a presentation layer, application layer, and a data store, or you're talking some sort of web services where microservice things in the cloud, perhaps, are doing web stuff. The good news is these are easy to honey. And one of the things that I like is a lot of people look at this and they say, especially like newer clients, they look at it and they say, Mick, so where are we going to deploy the honeypots? And I say, yes. We're going to deploy the honeypots everywhere. So, in the spirit of honeypots are dead easy, let's talk about using honeypots to confuse. So, what I mean by that is you can confuse the recon phase of the attacker by doing things like this, like port spoof. Now, for those of you who don't know, port spoof is a simple Linux application that you start up and running on a particular port, and when somebody interacts with it, it spoofs being a service of your choice. So what you're looking at here, let me zoom in so that it's easier to see, is I'm going to start port spoof on a server on 443. Now, this is not a web server. You can't have port spoof running on the same port as an actual service. Like that doesn't work, right? You can't have multiple things on the same port. And then what you simply do is you feed it a file of what signatures you want your system to spoof as. And so as soon as I hit enter, this is going to open up port 443, a port that the attackers expect to see in an environment. And then each time they interact with it, they get some random signature. And the way this works, let me start this up. Okay, let's go back and start this. All right, now that this is running, we're running it on port 443, and now when I run an Nmap against this machine, the way Nmap works is it sends a stimulus to that application, to that port, and then based off of the response it gets, it does a database lookup. If you recall when I ran the port spoof command, I had a signature file. These are signatures that are actually from the Nmap project, so I'm feeding back responses that it expects. Just truly random. So each time I interact, hopefully I should get a response here soon. Oh, 0% done. That's not a good sign. Oh, there we go. So unrecognized despite returning data. See, this is the kind of stuff that we want. We want this to start being confusing to the attacker. Now, I want to be clear, over time, with interaction, the attacker's going to see that this thing, depending on how you configure it, there's one mode I will caution you on. With port spoof, you can make it give a different response each time it's scanned. Do not do that. Like, that's crazy. What's much better is to have it hold that fake answer for like an hour or so. So go use tools like this, because the way Nmap works is, by default, it will scan the top 1,000 most popular ports, find some of those 1,000 top most popular ports that aren't in use on a machine, and port spoof them. So as the attacker starts interacting with it, they're like, well, cool, there's this old version of whatever. It's never going to work. They're burning cycles. So that's how you use honeypots in one way to confuse. The other thing that you can do is you can misdirect. Now, misdirection is one of my favoritist parts of honeypots, and I realize favoritist might not be proper English, but it's so fun I can't speak correctly. So here's the deal. We're going to misdirect their probes. Now, for those who don't know, in the event that you don't know what a robots.txt file is, it's a text file that sits on the root of your web server that specifies how search engines are allowed to interact with your environment. And the idea is well-behaved web crawlers will not scan different parts of your web application because maybe it's vulnerable or will break easily to a web scanner. Well, what you can do is honeyfy the robots.txt file, because let's talk a moment about the psychology of an attacker. When I look at a robots.txt file, I'm seeing all the portions of a web application or a website that you don't want the web crawlers to go through. Disallow? Oh, please, I am absolutely going there. So what you want to do is have the attackers fall victim to their own greed and avarice. And some of you who have a little bit of the attacker mindset look at this and go like, well, you're not my real dad. I'm going to go and do some stuff. Well, let's talk about Honey Upload. So this was on the couple slides ago, the uploader.jsp. I love, love, love doing this to web applications. What you do is you have some, it has to, of course, match what the robot.txt file is. I will have an uploader utility that will accept whatever the attacker send. Now here's the catch. What the attacker is hoping to do is have that somewhere in the web root so that it looks like it behaves normally. The ideal thing that you should be doing for safety is actually taking those files, uploading them to, and this bit is important, a write-only directory that your web server can write only to. Then, if you want to go a little more advanced, what I like to do is I will have a script that once that file gets written to that, blast zone, I will touch and create a fake file in an uploads directory that the attacker will find, and they'll be like, oh, my web shell's there. And then they click it and nothing happens. This is an amazing, I gotta tell you, I ran into this one. I burned about a half a day before I called up my point of contact at the client, and I was like, man, I cannot get my web shells to trigger. And they were like, oh, you mean, and then they started rattling off the different web shells I loaded. I was like, oh, so I'm busted, right? And they're like, yeah, we are. So use this, it works great. Here's another one that is amazing, and I wish more people did. Honey user logons, okay? Let me tell you something. If I see a disallow admin, I don't know what force of nature would keep me out of that thing, but that is a level of catnip I cannot walk away from. Well, so what you do is you just give them a sign-in page where they type in, and this bit's important. You want username and email, because that means that they're going to double their efforts. They're going to try likely user accounts and try likely emails. And then you have a little password field, and then you hit the login. Now, You can leave this alone as is, just have it be a blank submit that doesn't do anything. What I do, if you want to be extra spicy, if you want to be extra mean to the attackers, because you're in this talk, I'm assuming you do, what you do is you log the username, you log the password. And so if you see a generic attack where somebody's coming in as root or admin, pardon me while I yawn, right? That's boring, that's vanilla. But if they start coming at my systems with Douglas M1, oh, hello. If they start coming at me with passwords that look like passwords that I would use, that's a different thing. So one of the things that drives me nuts is in this industry, we like to make fun of the threat intel services. And to be fair, many of them are garbage. If they just say like, here's a bad IP address. Look, folks, do this. Do you want threat intel? Because that's how you get threat intel. And it's customized for you. It's real time, it's live, and if you start seeing your real user accounts, your real user emails in that function, jump on it with both feet. There is no defensive tool that does this out the box, but the level of effort on doing this, I mean, fairly low. Most organizations could stand this up in like a half day or less. Start using this. Honeypots are dead easy. You can also use honeypots to lie. So if you're going through the phases of the reconnaissance and probing, and now we're at the exploit, you can start lying to the exploits. Now, in the interest of time, I've glossed over a whole bunch of other things you can do to confuse and misdirect. We're going to talk a little bit about lying. Now, so far I've been talking about like classic web applications. Let's talk about web services a little bit. Unless you have been a developer for web applications, you might not be aware of the fact that they will often have XML files that explain how they work. Probably the most popular one is one called a WSDL, WSDL, WSDL. And what these are used for are for SOAP web services that will allow external entities to consume this XML file and know how to interact with it. Yeah, you want to know a real fun thing to do is put together something like this. Now, I don't know, especially for those of you who are watching on the internet, I don't know how this will play out. But this XML entity, it says, action CSR impersonate customer. I used this for a client of mine who's in the financial services industry, and all the time, this is a very common thing where customer phone reps will impersonate users in their web applications to complete a transaction, help them with some sort of problem. This is something expected. Now, note the little juicy morsel I put there in the documentation. Allow the phone rep to become a user. Internal use only. You put that on the public web application, and the best thing that you would do is just tuck this in the full WSDL file for this particular web service. Anyone who starts using this action, you know they're up to no good. That should never, ever, ever trigger. And I gotta tell you, when I set things like this up, within couple hours, you're gonna find that people just fall into this and start like spinning their wheels and going nuts. And you can go like get a little creative and be fun with this. Another one that I just love doing, and this is cruel. I want to be very honest. This is truly cruel to the attacker, is this. I make a CBC stream authenticator. So crypto stream generator used for creating user tokens. All right, there were some hands up when I asked how many of my pen testers were here. All right, pen testers, could you walk away from this? Hell no, no. And if you say, well, no, you are lying. And you want to see how easy it is to make some crypto tokens? Like, watch this. This is one of my favorite things to do, and it is fall out the chair easy. Watch. All right, let's zoom in here and explain what I'm doing. All right, I am going to take the first couple lines from random, which is just true random, and so when the attacker interacts with this web application, they just get what looks to be crypto legit random because, right? Random stuff, crypto looks random. I actually ran into this on a capture the flag environment, and I spent over a day just bashing my head on this thing, and I couldn't figure out how to use these tokens anywhere. And I asked them, now the thing you have to do for plausibility, this bit's important. You need to, whatever amount of random you give them needs to match what you're using for your actual user tokens, okay? But because these are random, they will never, ever, ever, ever match. And now detection is super easy because all you have to do is, one, look who's interacting with this token generator. Two, look who's having failed logins, because they're going to be spinning and burning major cycles on this. It's cruel to the attackers, which is what we want. Okay, let's try that again. So honeypots also can buy time. I showed you a couple ways that honeypots will buy time, but if you really want to buy time, what you can do is start doing honeypot data. And this is one of my most favorite, but it's also one of the cruelest ones that you can do. And this one will take a little bit of effort on your part. Of the entire deck, this is the one that will take the most effort, but the results are devastating. So what you're going to do is on production databases, and it has to be prod. On a production database, what you're going to do is you're going to do something like this. You're going to add a table and name it something like cc_info. And then you're going to populate this. There's various sites online that will generate fake credit card and fake username, fake security codes. You're going to populate this table and make it quite large, maybe, I don't know, a couple hundred meg. And then you're going to watch who interacts with this table. And here's the beauty of it. There's exactly 2 users on any major database that will interact with this table: the maintenance routines and the backup routines. That's it. DBAs, and I used to be a DBA, DBAs hate auditing. You start turning up the auditing levels and the database performance starts tanking. And they hate life when you do this. So what you do is you just cost them a little bit of disk space, and because this isn't ever being used, this shouldn't hit any cycles, and then all you do is query logging on that one table. And the reason that this works is this is catnip to the attackers. Here's another one that I did for a petrochemical client of mine: potential exploration sites. We have a site ID, latitude, longitude, purchase max price, and what purchase date they potentially want to buy this site at. You know what we did for extra fun? We started monitoring what the purchase records were for those latitude and longitude. Land sales in most parts of the world are a matter of public record. So this was an amazing one that worked really well. So, folks, honeypots are dead easy. You just got to get creative with them. All right. Now, before we go much further, I want you to understand that you're actually already ready to do honeypotting. I saw, and this kind of warmed my heart, some people were like, oh yeah, and taking notes. All right. This is the one that I want you to start doing immediately. Okay. Now, I got to give a shout out to Michael Hogue Rennie. He's a guy that I've just started collaborating with, and I just love the way his mind thinks. So I'm going to blank the slide for a second. Okay, pen testers. How many pen testers do I have in the crowd again? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Okay. Do y'all do recon on your target environments before you start attacking? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. All right, do you do like what I do and use Internet Wayback Machine or the Google Cache? Yeah? Like, this is like 101 how you start doing web app attacks. We're going to honeypot that. Now, this is the cool bit. 0 effort on your part. So, one of the things that not a lot of people really think about, and this is Michael's like just genius. He's like, web apps and websites are not like this monolithic thing. They're all these different reference files that point to other things, right? And when you load up the Google Cache, or if you want an even older one, you'll go to archive.org and load up ones from the past. And believe me, you want to do this as an attacker. Like, it's great for word lists. Like, there's all kinds of reasons you want to do this. These references still exist in the cache. And so when they go to a web page that's been cached, the cached version that the attacker goes to, that the pen tester goes to, is going to pull this file. And if that file was hosted on your site and no longer exists, it generates a 404. In every web server, this is the Apache web server access log. It will track the status codes. You're hoping for 202s, but for our purposes, what we want are 404s. Because if you're no longer using that script framework, as soon as you trigger a 404, you know somebody opened up an old version of the site. And the question is, why? So you are now using your 404s as honeypots, and you had to do nothing. Start leveraging this. And I want to be honest, this goes works really well. Like, it works great on pictures. Love doing this with pictures. Cascading style sheets are amazing. Most websites will go through different phases, right? Like, if you look at the web through time, for a while, drop shadow was a cool thing that we used to do a lot. So as fads change when it comes to design, people will use different cascading style sheets, and they'll oftentimes, for you as the defenders, make it real easy for you. They will do versioning numbers of the cascading style sheet. You can look for those older, unused cascading style sheets. When they hit a 404, you can catch them. JavaScript is a glorious one, as is XML schemas. So those of you who are working with like web services and stuff, I've not forgotten about you. The key point, though, for this to work, you need to host these. So we've been in the security community telling you need to have your JavaScript files local in case somebody takes over, like, Node.js or D3.js, right? You want to be hosting it local. You should anyway for performance reasons. But now, as you go through different versions of these frameworks, you're going to catch when somebody's doing reconnaissance against your site and it cost you 0. Chances are you all have SIMs or other log aggregators that are already consuming your Apache logs. You just need to do a minor tweak, and you've already got this done. So, little recap of where we're at. Honeypots are dead easy. I actually hope that you walk away from this talk going, well, that was a little bit of an anticlimax. That seemed a lot easier than I thought it would be. And the answer is yes, it's supposed to be. It's not that hard to do honeypots. You just got to get in the mind of the attacker and start putting some stuff in there on your environment that they would be looking for if they're doing their normal attack campaign. I don't care what any vendor tells you. Like, there's some really cool vendor technologies that'll spoof entire environments and all that. I'm here to tell you that I can detect those as an attacker pretty quickly because they look fairly similar. My pen testers, would that be fair to say, like those major virtualization, like where they virtualize an entire network segment, it looks entirely different than the network? This looks and feels like the real thing because you're using the real thing, just a slight twist, and you're not introducing any new risk. So you're slowing attackers down, making it easier for detection, quicker detection, all kinds of good stuff. So a couple things I want to talk about right now is the conventional wisdom isn't wise, okay? One thing that I want to push back against, now I love doing penetration testing, but that's not what gets me fired up. I love doing defense. Some of you raised your hand and said you're just getting started out in InfoSec. you can have a rewarding career and be an apex defender. You don't have to be a pen tester when you grow up. Now, I think that you do have to dabble in the attack arts to do good defense, but it's not the end-all be-all. The other thing is, I want to push back hard against folks that say you got to do all the things before you start doing active defense. And the answer is, if you have to do all the things before you have this fun, before you do this, you will never, ever get there. And if you don't believe me, anybody own their own home, right? Are you ever going to be done with your home improvements list before you watch, binge watch the Netflix or Amazon Prime? And everybody's like, no, heck no, right? Defense is a journey, and there's no reason you can't take these little side roads. Do something really quick and fun like this. All right, I've got a few extra bonus slides. We'll talk about this in a second. I want to say a big shout out to my wife. She does a lot of the stuff of keeping me sane and puts up with me raging against computers all the time. Want to give a big shout out to Wild West Hacking Fest. John, thank you, really appreciate it. This is my first time talking here, love it. And also you. I'm going to be hanging out the rest of the con. Feel free to chat with me. Right after the talk, I got to make a client call, but the rest of the time, feel free to reach out. I'd love to chat with you. If you saw this and thought that some of this would be hard, feel free to hit us up. I'd love to take you on as a client. I thought I would run a little early because I get nervous when I talk. So I've got the oh bleep, I finished too early slides. I always put this in on my talks. So let's give you a little extra bonus. Okay, more honey awesomeness. Honeypots can hurt. There is no reason that you have to passively sit back and let the attackers attack you. You don't have to be this fluffy little bunny. You can be evil. Now, hold on. You do need to consult your lawyers before you start doing some of these things. But one of my favorite things to do is to frustrate and confuse and, frankly, annoy the attackers. Honeypot zip bomb. Y'all know what zip bombs are? They're zips, highly optimized, compressed down, and when you open them up, it's gigabytes or terabytes of disk space gets chewed up real quick. Now, a lot of people, when I talk with clients and get the sign-off for doing this, they're like, well, that sounds cool and all, and we want to do it, but how are we going to get the attackers to actually download a zip bomb and try to extract it? And I say, well, I got an idea. Right? Name it something like a backup. Another one that is really fun. Now, please do not play with this for fun. This one's real dangerous. Office documents are zip files, right? You can make a docx, a pptx, an xlsx, that x, XML, but they're zipped. You can make those be zip bombs. So do things like, I've got a couple financial services clients, and what I will do is I will, in the robots.txt, I will put disallow quarterly reporting, okay? Now, here's the thing that's fun. What I will do is I will actually disallow the real quarterly reporting directory, but then I add a little extra thing. I have a directory that I'll put in there, because they'll have a directory structure. I'll put one that says next quarter -draft. If you want to do financial fraud, that would be a lovely place to do that. So make use of that, put your zip bomb in there. When they download it, bust it. Again, get lawyer sign-off, because you could get into trouble doing that. Another one that I love to do is to make PDFs be weaponized. Now, I don't know if any of you folks have done some serious research on PDFs. I will contend that no one knows what a valid PDF is. And the reason why is PDFs will support active content I mean, for goodness sakes, the P in PDF is PostScript. So there's a scripting language by design in these formats. But they also will support executables, JavaScript, and other nastiness. So one of the things that I like to do is use MSF Venom to make a meterpreter that will be generated and deployed to the attackers. Now, I want to be clear, depending on what you do with this meterpreter, it can be hacking back. It can be illegal. But there is case law in the US where you are allowed to do things like grab their IP address and grab their geolocation. And those are things you can do with meterpreter, and you're not like, don't try to do anything stupid like delete the system or, for goodness sakes, like every now and then people will be like, can we steal back our data? No, like it's gone, right? Like your data has left the building. But what you can do is something like this, quote generator PDF, generate quote PDF. If no quote ID is given, send all PDFs associated with the current user. I have had multiple shells come back. Now, here's the neat little thing why I would recommend that you have it send multiple PDFs. You might not know the target operating system of the people that are attacking you. And so I will make a weaponized PDF for Windows, Mac, Linux, etc., and then when it detonates, it phones home. So, use techniques and ideas like this, because it works, and it's a hell of a lot of fun. So, any questions? I saw a lot of head nods, some people getting evil smiles. I like it. Yes, sir. Oh, great question. So about throttling was basically the thrust of the question. One of the things that I would encourage you to do as you go down this avenue is you really should look into using QoS. So quality of service is just a common thing to encounter. Most organizations will use QoS to guarantee a service minimum, and that's used for things like VoIP. Right? Like you need the call to be of a certain quality. QoS works both ways. You can have a service maximum. Now, please don't raise your hand, okay? Many of us work in organizations where we're not allowed to be as mean on the defense as we would like to be, right? A lot of times marketing will say, well, we can't block the attack because what if it's a false positive? What if they're behind a NAT? And we're blocking real customers. And so they get real trigger shy about putting up firewall blocks. QoS to the rescue. So one of the things that I like to do is as people interact with my honeypots, you start degrading their service. And all of a sudden, they're still doing evil, but it's at dial-up speed. So it's a way that you can fight and win. And that's where it's also fun with those backups. One of my favorite things to do is as soon as you interact with a quote-unquote backup file, you instantly trigger a hard QoS, and you're pulling down a zipbomb at stupid slow speeds, and it's going to take you, maybe an hour to pull down a couple hundred meg, which would be a fair backup size. So did that answer your question? That was a good one. Thanks. Yes, sir. So the question is the fear of the unintended consequence, meaning what, like the marketing and the business owner not wanting to block? Oh, in my experience, the struggles are real. Like a lot of organizations are very, very reluctant to pull trigger. I used to, yeah. Oh. Is their reluctance legitimate? And I would say yes. A perfect example is a lot of, so if you have a client base that's based out of like an educational, like an EDU, a lot of EDUs are coming from behind one NAT. And so if you kill that NAT IP, so yeah, that is a real problem. Now, depending on your market vertical, like it may be a little overblown, but let me put it this way. I'm not about to burn my political capital fighting that fight. I would rather fight other fights. That was an awesome question. Yeah. Oh, okay. I should have made a slide for this. The question is, how do you address the question of, if we have honeypots, doesn't that make the attacker more angry? And the answer is, that's a stupid line of reasoning. That straight up is dumb, right? Like, during World War II, the British actually set up fake airfields with like cardboard and like plywood planes, and at no point did somebody like clutch their, necklace or whatever and go, "Oh my, I say, that Hitler chap may get more angry if he bombs a fake plane." Like, it's just a bankrupt idea. Get over it. Like, the attackers are gonna attack. That's what they do. And see, yeah, they might get mad, but you now know that they're coming for you. And some of these techniques, like especially that uploader technique, those uploads tend to be fairly specific to groups. Now, to be fair, you will get some drive-by commodity stuff, but what's interesting is you will a lot of times find that attackers will, use their specific WebKit, and you can have an indicator. So I would just push back real hard on that. I'll probably put a slide in that, like as a bonus, because it's not so. Like, the attackers are going to attack, they're going to come at you anyway. At least you now have a better chance of detecting them. Can I do the Hitler thing again? Like, I'm assuming that's what you wanted, is the big power pose. Okay. Yes, sir. So the question is, let me twist your question slightly. Like, how much reality do I give the attacker when I'm seeding data? Do I ever give them real passwords or real account names? Ish. Like, I try not to give them actual real user accounts and real passwords. That would be politically hard to stomach. But what I do like to do is I will give them an account that looks like it would be legit based off of our naming convention, and a password that might be legit looking based off of our name or password conventions, and see what's going on there. Have I learned any interesting techniques from the shells that have been uploaded? No. So I do a lot of research with web shells and stuff like that. The question is, what have I seen with the web shells? I will tell you that I'm seeing a little more reliance over the last couple of years of living off the land attacks. So a lot of the people are, you go to conferences and they talk about that. I'm seeing that being done a lot more predominantly. They're getting better about using your own environment against you. Okay, you, sir. So the question is, do I differentiate between internal and external honeypots? And the answer is yes, I do, actually. For the Crown Jewels web, I should have put this one in. One of my favorite things to trigger for is when somebody goes to your web browser proxy. The web browser proxy will add an x-forwarded 4 header, and on my internal web browser proxy, I'm looking for anybody that has an x-forwarded 4. That means that somebody's doing a man in the middle, and then I'll redirect them. If it's like a super sensitive thing, I'll redirect them to a version of that looks and feels real, but we've got the audit dialed all the way up. So yeah, I do. All right. Looks like, oh, okay, yeah, question. Yep. So worded differently, your question is, if you have an internal pen test team or attack group, or even a trusted vendor, would you tell them that you're using this? And the question, so that's fair. I don't know if I would. It depends on your relationship. You can potentially, I have had clients say, hey, FYI, we do use honeypots, and I'm like, okay, cool. But like, I don't get like table flipping angry if I trip a honeypot, because that's fair, like that's a defense. And I think any mature pen tester or mature assessor would just be like, all right, game on, you're doing a good job of defense, you're doing something a little exotic. So yeah. Yep. Yeah, so that's where, okay, so the comment is if your pen tester or your consultant is spending a lot of time on a honeyed object, what do? I would warn them. I would, because you don't want to be burning too many cycles. Like, just say, hey, we got you. Let them know early. I'm getting a sign that I got to get going, so I'm going to be hanging around. I appreciated all your questions. Feel free to walk up to me, though, after I'm done with my call. Internet, thanks. Wild West Hacking Fest, it was fun.